right, Mr. DeMille, I'm ready for my close-up.
Why don't you come up sometime, see me?
Rated bar! Top of the world!
Fasten your seatbelts. It's going to be a bumpy night.
The stuff that dreams are made of.
Hi, Wendy here. Before we start off our episode today, I want to remind everybody to check us out on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and TikTok. Also, please leave a rating or comment on iTunes or wherever you get your podcast. You can find us on social media by simply searching Silver Screen Time Machine, and please make sure you follow our podcast, Silver Screen Time Machine, anywhere you get your podcast. Thank you, and enjoy the episode. Hello, and welcome again to Silver Screen Time Machine, Wendy's Classic Film Review. Today we have a guest, Gwendolyn. Welcome, Gwendolyn.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, our pleasure. And can you tell us a little bit about yourself? I know you're involved in a lot of things. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Gwendolyn Kiste, and I'm a writer, mostly horror fiction and nonfiction, but a variety of different things. So I've written novels, short story collections, essays, and I love classic films so much.
Yeah.
I'm so excited to be here. I love, obviously, classic horror, but I love so much classic film.
Yeah.
Probably not all. I shouldn't say all. There's some classic films, no, but lots and lots of classic
And how
film.
can people read your books if they want to?
I have a website, gwendolynKiste.com. It's got everything on there. That's, sort of the landing spot. I'm also on social media, so on Facebook and on Instagram. You can find me there.
Yeah, so check it out if you like horror books. Since you're such a fan of horror, the choice we made here is surprising. This was your choice, but we are getting on our time machine and we are going back to 1961 and we are talking about...
The Misfits.
The Misfits, not a horror film at all.
It's funny, though, after we finished rewatching it, because my husband and I have seen it a number of times, he's like, it is kind of a horror film, though, because there's a lot of existential dread in it. So
and
there's definitely elements.
There's some horrible scenes regarding animals, but we will get to that. Yes, my least favorite part of the film. But... And we should also mention that although I'm called Wendy, my name is actually Gwendolyn as well. So we both have the same name.
I know. I love that. Two Gwendolyns.
Yes.
That's not, that's not a confluence of events that happen nearly enough.
It's very, very uncommon name. So it's very funny that we're both named that. But The Misfits, this is directed by John Huston, two-time Oscar winner, Best Director, Best Screenplay, for The Treasure of Sierra Madre. He actually has 14 Oscar nominations because he started out as a screenplay writer, and a lot of his films he did the directing and the screenplay. So he got nominated twice. He's also the son of an old actor, Walter Huston, who's actually a really good actor. I'm really a big fan of Walter Huston. Not as big a fan of John Huston, I have to tell you.
Oh, I can't wait to talk more about that.
It's more a personal matter, not based on his films, but his general attitude towards certain people. But anyhow, screenplay by Arthur Miller. Do we like Arthur Miller?
I like his writing. I love The Crucible. I love this.
So he did have an Oscar nomination for The Crucible. He's basically a playwright. He adapted several of his plays into film, including this one. This was, I guess, actually kind of a short story. He's a Pulitzer Prize winner. He's known for his play The Death of a Salesman is his most famous. He also had some involvement with the House Un-American Activities Committee because he was labeled a communist.
Yep.
He did not name names like certain directors, but
like a certain director. There's always one that comes to mind for everyone.
Yes. So if you know who we're talking about, it's very obvious. But he did not name names, but married Marilyn Monroe.
Yes.
And in fact, Marilyn Monroe's in this film. So this is kind of an awkward situation here. We will get to that a little bit later. The score, Alex North. Alex North has 15 Oscar nominations. He also won a Lifetime Achievement Award, and he was only one of 2 film composers to ever win that award. Couple interesting things. He wrote the music to Spartacus, Cleopatra, and A Streetcar Named Desire, in addition to this film. Okay. And he also wrote the music for Unchained Melody.
Oh.
That ghost song.
Yeah, I know, right? That's I feel like what everybody always thinks of. But I actually didn't know that.
And he is from Chester, PA, Alex North. So a Pennsylvania boy, I guess. Cinematography, Russell Meddy. He's a 2-time Oscar nominee. He won an Oscar for Spartacus. He actually did some Orson Welles films, Touch of Evil and The Stranger, And he was a regular collaborator with, I think somebody is one of your favorites, Douglas Sirk.
Oh, yeah. It was
He
one
made
of my
11
favorites.
films with Douglas Sirk.
That is so interesting that he worked with Orson Welles and Douglas Sirk, because I can see the influence of both of those types of films. Like, I can see how this kind of fits into that, the very stark black and white, but then also the melodrama of it. Interesting. I love that.
I like the cinematography in this film.
Yes.
It's very nice, the black and white, and there's a lot of beautiful landscapey shots here. And John Huston is an on-location guy. He is not a studio guy, despite what he will drag all his actors through and make their lives miserable hell.
Yeah.
But he is a location guy, and this was filmed on location in Nevada. So the editor, George Tomasini, he actually was a big-time Alfred Hitchcock guy. He did a lot of Alfred Hitchcock films. He has an Oscar nomination for North by Northwest, but he did Vertigo, To Catch a Thief, Psycho, The Birds. His sort of trademark was use of jump cuts and overlapping dialogue for exclamation points, which was dynamic and inventive at the time. That covers the crew. Did you have any comments on any of the crew? What did you think of the score? Because the score to me is kind of there. Sometimes I'll say, oh, that's nice there. But a lot of times I don't really pay much attention to it, to be honest.
Yeah, in this film, I don't feel like it was super showy. I remember a couple times when there were these kind of moments of melodrama. I remember it really surging and noticing it then in a way that I did think worked.
Yeah.
This is a movie of intense emotion.
Yes.
This is a melodrama. And so I felt like that worked. I felt like those moments worked. But yeah, overall, it wasn't something like that I can think of any exact song or moment.
Yeah, you can't
or
even really
anything.
like hum it. You
Exactly.
don't
Exactly.
even remember. You're like, okay, it was there, but we don't remember much about
Yeah.
it. But
Yeah.
no, it does definitely have some very big music in certain scenes where there's big action going on in the scene.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
this film stars Clark Gable, Marilyn Monroe, Montgomery Clift, Eli Wallach, and Thelma Ritter, which is a great, great cast. You have two really fantastic character actors there. Thelma Ritter and Eli Wallach are both amazing actors.
Yes.
Thelma Ritter is a 6-time Oscar nominee.
But never won, I don't
Never
think. And
won.
that was so wrong. I love her in Rear Window. I feel like that was the first thing I remember seeing her in as a kid. And so that was what I really relate to her all the time. But I remember seeing this film for the first time not long after seeing Rear Window and just loving her in this as well. And there is a moment early on when they're at Guido's house and all four of them are doing things like Thelma Ritter and Clark Gable and Marilyn Monroe and Eli Wallach. It was unbelievable. I'm like, I don't even know where to look in the shot. There's so much great acting going on, and that was almost like overwhelming at points. Like you said, this is
Do you
just
mean
an amazing.
like when they were doing the dancing and she's
Yes,
knocking
like
on her cast?
everybody's doing things.
Yeah,
Yes,
and the way they cut, there's your editor, I think, with his jump cuts,
Yes,
maybe. The way
yes.
they're cutting that scene, like back and forth to all these people. It's really interesting. Yeah, Thelma Ritter's great. Well, Montgomery Clift is a 4-time Oscar nomination and never won.
not right.
No,
right.
we're very angry about that. We hate that.
We do.
But the one person who does have an Oscar is Clark
Clark
Gable,
Gable,
for
yes.
It Happened One Night.
Yes.
So Clark Gable, in my opinion, this is Clark Gable's best film, his best role.
Absolutely.
Hands down. I think he was
Absolutely.
fantastic in this.
Yes.
I think Clark Gable, in my opinion, acts like Clark Gable in most roles, but this is very, very much a character that
Yes.
he is portraying here. And I
Yes.
think he did a wonderful job on this film. And he himself said this was one of his favorite performances.
Oh.
So, and also Marilyn. I thought Marilyn was fantastic in this film.
Yeah. I think it's one of her best performances, too. I think it's up there with Niagara and Don't Bother to Knock as movies that really gave her an opportunity to really, really do that dramatic acting that I think that she really wanted to do. She's such a great comedian, too. I
Yes,
mean,
she
everybody
is.
acts like she was just being herself, but that wasn't ever fair to her. She
Yeah.
was very much a great actress in comedy, but I do love her drama roles, and I do think this is one of her best roles.
And she had quite the struggle getting through this particular film, as we mentioned before, married to Arthur Miller, but that was severely on the rocks.
Yes.
John Huston is a kind of director that he's been known in the past to do rewrites day of or the day before, handing you script pages the day before that you have to learn and somehow be able to go on to and shoot the next day. And now that's a real struggle for Marilyn because Marilyn liked to have a lot of preparation time. She had Paula Strasberg with her. She seemed to feel like she needed these ridiculous acting coaches that she probably didn't need.
That she probably didn't. That's my opinion, too. I feel like there's a lot of debate as to whether or not she, did they help? Did they not? up, I feel like they hindered her. I feel like
I feel like they did too.
really made her feel more insecure
Secure, yeah.
and just used her for their own publicity. Yeah, that's how I feel too.
Yeah, I
think
agree.
she was very talented on her own. Because like I said, one of the ones I mentioned was Don't Bother to Knock, very early in her career.
Yeah.
Incredible dramatic performance, way before I think she met the Strasberg. So yeah,
How are they going to make any money off of her if they don't keep her thinking she needs them?
Yep.
But anyhow, so she was struggling with Arthur Miller at this time, and he kind of wrote this character based on her and also pulled out a lot of her major flaws, which could not have felt good to sit there and try to portray your own flaws on camera as you're being given script pages the night before that you have no idea what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And people complained Marilyn Monroe's always late to the set. She was up, first of all, she was up all night trying to learn the script.
Yeah,
to
I
begin
mean,
with.
that's a ridiculous thing to do to actors to begin with. And then especially someone like Marilyn who did, struggle with a lot of, if not stage fright, then something similar to it to begin with. And that's so hard. That's so hard.
She was very terrified to ever come on. And that's a lot of the reason why she wouldn't. Plus, at this point, both Marilyn and Montgomery Clift, we have to call a spade, both drug addicts, both in a really bad state at this point. As a matter of fact, they had medical people on call in case something would occur.
I don't think I ever heard that, but that doesn't surprise me.
Because they thought at any moment Marilyn or Monty could have a disastrous thing occur, and they had to.
And then, of course, the irony being they at least both made it through this, and then Clark Gable passed away 2 days later, so it was like he was the one who basically almost didn't make it through. Yeah, he needed it more than they did at that moment.
They didn't want to insure Clark Gable at first.
Really?
Yeah, because he was in such poor health. So all that nonsense that people say about Marilyn being the cause of Clark Gable's death, that's absolutely absurd.
No, that's absurd. I mean, honestly, it was almost certainly the working conditions and the fact that he shouldn't have done the stunt at the end, the big wrangling, which, like I said, when I was watching this with my husband, I'm like, it's like watching Clark Gable die. It's like, this is like what caused his death just a few days later.
Yeah,
and
well,
that's horrifying.
that's your director, John Huston.
Yeah, listen to you. I love it. I love your very strong opinion on John Huston. This is great.
Yeah, that's your director, John Huston. He had no mercy for his actors.
Yeah.
But yeah, Clark Gable, and also a lifelong smoker and drinker.
Yes.
I mean, that might have perhaps had something to do with it.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And also just the heat. I'm sure it was very, very hot in Nevada.
No, I think they said it was like 100. I had written down like 102 degrees or something daily. I mean, it was a mess. But let's start to talk a little bit about the plot here. Okay. So some of the dialogue in this film, I mean, Arthur Miller, I appreciate he's a great playwright, but sometimes the dialogue is a little much. In certain places, I just kind of like, oh, come on,
I actually felt the opposite because I love melodrama, and so I feel like there was a lot of really philosophical dialogue.
Yes.
Like, people don't talk the way that most of the characters talk in this movie. But I still loved it. It was the type of stuff that, like, I love that kind of stuff. But it is, you're right, it is a little much. It really is.
I like
very
it sometimes,
theatrical.
And then other times I'm just like,
just get to
your
point.
Give me a break. Come on. But the film starts out, and this is interesting. The film starts out, we see Thelma Ritter, and first off, we see Guido, which is played by Eli Wallach.
Yes.
He's this car mechanic. He's coming to this house to check out this car that obviously he's been called. And Thelma Ritter comes out, and what we find out is she's kind of this lady that runs this boarding house for women that are coming to Reno to get a divorce.
Yes.
Because back in the day, you would come to Reno and you'd have to stay there for an extended
6
period
weeks.
of time.
Yes. Yeah. That's something that I love about this movie is that at the time, they didn't really give explanation in the movie very much about what's going on because in 1961, everybody knew.
Yeah, you knew.
And that's something that modern audiences, I don't know that they understand, that divorce was almost impossible back then.
Right.
And you had to go and stay at some place like Nevada, and you would stay in Reno for like 6 weeks.
Yep.
And Thelma Ritter's character had to go with Marilyn's character to say, yes, she's been here 6 weeks. Because people would try to be like, oh, I'm just going to rent a place for 6 weeks, but then I'm going to go home. And it's like, no, you had to be accountable for like the whole 6 weeks. And so I thought that was so interesting. And I love that about the movie, that it starts out that way. And this thing that there's no explanation in the movie, but we almost need one now because it's not normal.
Yeah,
at this
and she
point.
says at one point, you have to be my witness, Isabel is the name of Thelma Ritter's character. Rosalind is the name of Marilyn's character. And Marilyn's trying to memorize this statement she's going to make, which is interesting because apparently what Arthur Miller wrote in was the exact statement she made on her Joe DiMaggio divorce.
Really?
That's what I read.
Wow.
Wasn't that nice of him?
Wow, that's intense. That's
Yeah.
really intense.
Yeah.
I did think it was interesting in the film itself that Rosalind says that it's not even really true.
Right.
Because in order to get a divorce, not only did you have to stay in Reno for 6 weeks, there had to be a
Grounds.
quote unquote reason. Yeah, grounds for it. Where she even says, like, he just wasn't a good husband. They just
Right.
weren't happy. And she's like, these things aren't even true, but she had to go into court and say
say
it
them.
because otherwise they wouldn't give her the divorce. And we kind of take for granted that you can just get a divorce for any reason
Yeah.
now. Back then, it was almost impossible.
Right.
They wanted you to stay married even if you were miserable.
Right, exactly. And her character, I feel like we see right off the bat, her character is kind of nervous and anxious and unhappy. I mean,
Yes.
you get the impression that she's unhappy. As soon as Guido sees Rosalind, he's like, oh, all the men, as soon as they see Rosalind, which I mean, of course, Marilyn Monroe is one of the most beautiful women ever to walk the earth. And they have her in this blonde wig, which normally I don't like wigs on, but I thought it actually made her look really sort of angelic and pure.
It did. I actually didn't realize it was a wig. I didn't. I a lot of times can't pick out wigs, which is funny because I love wigs and I wear wigs, especially when I do cosplay, but I can never pick them out. I didn't realize it was a wig, but it did look angelic.
Yeah.
I remember at one point the way they lit it, it actually looked like a halo around her.
She looked very sweet and innocent.
It was lovely.
Yeah.
It was lovely hair. Yeah.
Which is a nice character for her because we all know Marilyn was often vilified for being scandalous, I guess, and having affairs or whatever. But we're not going to get into that. But yes.
We love Marilyn here.
Yeah, we do. We love Marilyn. So she sees Guido. They go off and they go to the courthouse and her husband shows up. And the interesting thing about her husband is that's Kevin McCarthy.
Yes.
Kevin McCarthy was actually brought on this film because they thought he would be helpful to Montgomery Clift because he was
That's right. I
a
did hear
great
that
friend of Montgomery Clift for many, many years. And they were so worried about Montgomery Clift's state of mind and his addiction problems that they thought having him there would be kind of a helpful thing, which meanwhile it made no difference at all. And actually Monty was excellent on this shoot. He had very little trouble. They said he was letter perfect with all of his script. He caused no trouble at all and no problems in production. And he was really easy to deal with in this particular film. So it didn't matter. But Kevin McCarthy also was in another Arthur Miller film that he's known for Death of a Salesman.
That's right.
And I think he was nominated for Academy Award for Death of a Salesman.
You know what's funny is I always connect him to Invasion of the Body Snatchers. That's it. And it's also funny because that movie has a reference to his character gets divorced and that had to go to Reno. So it's funny then that like two movies I always think of when I think about people having to go to Reno for divorce is Invasion of the Body Snatchers and the Misfits, and he's in both of them. But that's always my connection. But in Death of a Salesman.
So he does try to half-heartedly convince Marilyn
To not divorce him.
And she says she stands up for herself. Despite being nervous and shy and whatever she is and sad, she seems to be pretty strong character-wise. She doesn't necessarily let people push her around.
Yes, I do really love that about her character. And he shows up then, but she's like, no, it's too late. You only want me because you're about to lose me. Like, no.
Yeah.
And then we cut and we don't see his character
No, he
again.
never comes back.
I forgot that we didn't see him again until it's about halfway through. I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. He doesn't come back. I always forget. It's like a split second, really.
Yeah, he's
and it's
gone.
interesting. He's gone.
He's there and gone. We didn't need you for Montgomery Clift. Go away. No, just kidding. But anyhow, what they wind up doing afterwards is she's obviously very stressed out afterwards, so they go have a drink and she's kind of freaked out. This is a really poignant scene, I think, where she's talking about her mother and how her mother was never there for her, which is kind of poignant because that's very accurate to Marilyn's life. Her mother was a paranoid schizophrenic. She had major mental health problems. Marilyn hardly ever spent any time with her. She wound up in a mental institution. So, and she never knew her father. So it's kind of a very poignant scene, and she looks so distressed in this scene. And again, Arthur Miller making her relive these things. Just really, really sad. But it's a really beautiful scene, and she does a great job in that. And but then she cheers up and she says, let's get some drinks. And she sees this dog. Yeah. And it's another thing, I think, to sort of represent the innocence of her character, the way she is with the dogs and the horses. This is something that was done a lot in silent films, where D.W. Griffith would put his actresses that he wanted to be sweet, pure, and virginal with animals.
Yeah.
So you see her with the dog, and the dog, we find out the dog belongs to Clark Gable, who's his name in the film is Gay, which, this day people would be like, what kind of name is that? But,
Well, isn't it like
Gay Lord?
Yeah.
But, everybody
that
calls
was
him.
a name back in the day.
It was the name. It was a name.
Like, everybody has interesting, like, I feel Montgomery Clift's name, what is it, Perce?
Perce.
And I'm like, I've never heard that name, Perce, because I always have the closed captions on. I'm like, wow, that's so interesting. So, like,
well, and Guido, I mean,
yeah,
that's an odd name. But anyhow, so we see actually Gay is sitting there with Guido at the bar, and he wonders where his dog's gone, and then he sees Marilyn, and again he's also stunned by Marilyn's beauty and Rosalind, whatever. And Guido's like, "Oh yeah, wait, I know these girls." Yeah, so
he even mentioned her too, Gay, or like when they were like riding before they knew they were going to run into her again. So I did think that was like a nice little thing of they were thinking about her all day.
Yeah. But so anyhow, they run into them and they convince them to go to this house. Guido has this unfinished house in the countryside or something.
Yeah, that house is amazing because it is so weird and very much unfinished.
Yeah.
Have you ever seen Twin Peaks? Because it reminded me of Shelley and Leo's house in Twin Peaks, which is also this unfinished house. So there's all these rooms, the doors that open into nothing and things. And it's like very disorienting. It's a very disorienting house in this movie.
That's like that house. What is it? The Winchester
house. Yes, it is. It's a very strange house in this movie, and I just kind of love it as the architecture of everything in this movie. I will say, and this sometimes is a theatrical device, everything is very heavy-handed. Yeah, everything is like the house is half finished, just like their lives are half finished, and the wild Mustangs are being rounded up and cut, just like they feel like they're cut. But I kind of love that. Again, I love melodrama, so that overwrought symbolism, I'm like 2 thumbs up. I love it. So I loved the house.
So they wind up coming to this house, and they start dancing and having a nice time, and Marilyn's dancing with Guido and she's dancing with Gay, and it's like all these men are competing for her attention. For Isabella. They're always like, wait, what's your name again?
I know, it's awful. It's awful. It's terrible.
But that's your scene that you like, where they shoot all the different cuts of going
everyone.
from person to person, and each person's doing something different, and it's very busy. It's a very busy scene.
But it's so interesting to have such really strong actors, and each one of them is doing something so interesting and so unique, and it's like, gosh, it's the type of stuff I love about old film. I feel like movies are made to be so much faster now, and it's much more, you know, let's do this big budget thing. And there's definitely still some of that going on in smaller budget work, but there's just not enough kind of smaller budget and mid-budget movies anymore that can focus on character like that. And it's just really neat to see these actors that are all so talented doing all these different interesting things.
Yeah, as much as we maybe are not the biggest fan of John Huston in general, he does put together beautiful films. I will give him that. And this is a beautiful film, beautifully shot film. So they have their little celebration, and then it winds up suddenly they're deciding that it kind of does it in an odd fashion, because at first Gay's trying to kind of hit on Rosalind, and she's like, no, I don't like you like that. And then all of a sudden she's in bed with him.
Yeah, I felt like we got something cut out there. I forgot it was that abrupt. And I'm like, whoa, I really feel like we missed a scene or two, that something got left on the cutting room floor that we really needed, because it did feel way too abrupt.
How did it go from that to that? It was very strange.
That was really the moment more than anything else in the movie. I'm just going to have to keep going with this, because I know I've seen it several times before, but it's so interesting because it is almost like vignettes, that it's hard to remember the movie all the way through unless you just saw it, because a lot of the individual scenes I don't remember. I always remember the stuff with the Mustangs at the end.
Oh, yeah.
But that's only like so much of the movie. That's maybe a quarter, maybe a third at the most. Like most of it is in and around Reno. And a lot of that is very strange to try to remember it straight through, because it is like vignettes. It's almost like these little moments here and there, and it's not necessarily a cohesive continuing story necessarily. And especially when you have moments like that, where it's like you go from one thing to another. I'm like, I don't even know why this is happening, but I'm going to go with it.
Well, she changed her mind, apparently.
Yeah, apparently.
Yeah, but the next thing you know, they're living together, and he's planting all this nice garden for her and making the step for her. And she said, I can go up, I can go in the house, I can go out the house. Yeah. And she's just so cute. I mean, she's just like a little kid.
Yes.
You get this little kid energy from her, and it's really very sweet. And I do think that maybe also was something Arthur Miller wrote in that was indicative of the real Marilyn, this childlike quality that Marilyn did have. And so then anyhow, they get into this fight because the rabbit is eating the lettuce.
Yes.
And this is another place where she really stands up for herself. But the rabbit's eating the lettuce, and he wants to go shoot the rabbit.
Yeah.
And she's very adamant that, she doesn't want the rabbit shot. She doesn't want things killed. And they get into a big fight. Like, wait, you're not respecting me, but you're not respecting me.
Yeah.
And they're both very hard-headed.
Yeah.
When they bang up against each other, there's like no give. They're both on two opposite sides of the fence. But then that's interrupted because Guido shows up with Isabel,
Yes.
which I read, and I didn't go back to listen, but I read that Clark Gable called her Thelma.
Oh my gosh,
that
I didn't
scene.
catch that.
I
Oh my
didn't
gosh.
either, but I read that and I thought, is that true? And I never got a chance to go back and listen. But now you can listen, folks, for yourself if you watch the film. That he accidentally called her Thelma in that scene, but I don't know. I can't say that for certain. And then they show Guido the house. They've made all these adjustments, and then they decide that they're going to go to Dayton to the rodeo.
Yes.
Because they want to pick up help to go Mustanging. Guido and Gay want to go Mustanging, and they want to go pick up help. So they all pound the car, and they go. And this is when the movie to me just starts, because this is when we see Montgomery Clift.
Yes.
And
yes.
to me, he brings this, and he is not known for doing this, but he brings this very lighthearted character.
Yes.
And this is not Montgomery Clift at all.
No, it really isn't. And so often, like his
He's
roles,
very serious.
And honestly, like his backstory is very serious and it's very tragic. But he's such a light presence.
Yes.
He's the sweetest of the men
Yes.
in the movie. By a long shot, he's the sweetest of the three of them, and just has this very kind energy around him. And I always forget that until I'm watching it. And he's so dour in a lot of his movies, so brooding.
And
he's
he's
a very
actually
brooding
quite
actor.
funny in this movie.
He is.
He's actually amusing. And he still has his serious moments, and he still has a lot of some angst. You can't write Montgomery Clift without some angst.
I know, right?
I mean, even if you did write it, he would put it in. But so they pull up, they see him at this phone booth, and supposedly John Huston would say this is one of the greatest scenes that he's ever shot, is this phone booth scene with Montgomery Clift supposedly talking to his mother.
Yeah.
Perce. His name is Perce Howland or something. And he's talking to his mother on the phone, and it's a really, really poignant scene. You already learn a ton about the character just on this one phone call.
Yes.
And he just does a great job of showing what the character's feeling.
Yeah.
And he was always very good at that. But
Yes.
it's phenomenal in this scene. And he comes out and he's just so cheerful, and he's like, what's going on? He's like, I need a ride to the rodeo. I'm going to ride in the rodeo. And they get him in the car, and then he's getting all drunk, and he's yelling out the window at people.
I know, and I'm like, oh no, don't be that drunk and going to the rodeo. Oh no.
But it's so cute the way he's like yelling at people. That thing he says that when Marilyn says that she's a dancer, and what did he say? I once went to a nightclub that was called The Naked Truth, and they weren't kidding.
They weren't kidding, yeah.
It's just so funny. He's just so cute in that car scene. I love that car scene so much. I just love his character in this more than anything that I've ever seen him do. So they get to the rodeo, and Perce is going to ride in the rodeo. He's got a horse he's going to ride. Marilyn doesn't seem to understand things like rodeos or
No, and she definitely doesn't understand the Mustanging at all.
She doesn't understand any of this
No.
stuff. But before they go to the rodeo, I can't forget this scene because this is such a great scene. First, they go into that sort of little club,
Yes.
that little bar or whatever, and there's this fellow there with his grandson.
I know, and I'm like, why is that kid in this rowdy bar?
Yeah.
And the grandson has that paddle ball.
Yes, he has the paddle ball, and then the grandfather is quite drunk. He's this drunken old man, and he's saying, "Oh, I'll give you $2 if you can hit the paddle ball 10 times." And then Marilyn takes it, and she just starts hitting it. And you see all these people betting money, and it gets really exciting, and everybody's really exciting, having a great time. And then this other fellow starts slapping her butt, and then
and like
Guido
the
gets
men are like,
infuriated.
no.
Guido, like, what are you doing? He starts trying to attack him and so forth. And they wind up winning all this money from her just hitting this paddle ball. But what's really funny in that particular scene is that the grandfather buys the little boy like a glass of pop, right?
Okay.
And then so he says, here's a pop for you, Sonny. And he's sitting up on the bar. He's drinking his little pop. And when they're all watching Marilyn, they're all focused on Marilyn. Thelma, she has a drink nearby. Her name Isabel has a drink nearby. And she picks up this boy's pop thinking it's her drink. And she picks it up and she's like, oh, this doesn't taste like there's any alcohol. Yeah. And so she pours all this whiskey in and then she drinks it and then she puts it back down. And then the little boy picks it up and drinks it.
Oh, no, I didn't even catch that. I'm sure I did in the past, but I did not catch that this time. Oh, my gosh. I have to go back and at least watch that part.
The little boy picks up this drink and he's just drinking the soda pop. And at the end of the scene, when they're all leaving, the kid's like totally drunk on the bar. And then and the grandfather goes, Fletcher, where'd you get the money? It's just so priceless, that little part right there. It's so cute. But so they go out into the thing, and there's this church lady who I also think is interesting character as well.
She irritates me. I'm like, get away from them. And then Marilyn just starts giving them the money.
She's like,
because
sinners.
And actually it really made me mad, especially I think because everybody always called Marilyn like, oh, you're, I think that actually it irritated me. And like, she's giving them, I'm literally yelling at the screen, don't give them your money.
Yeah.
You worked hard at that battle. Don't give that old mean religious lady your money.
and you got sexually harassed.
Right? She got sexually harassed. Like, my gosh, don't give up your money.
Yeah.
Grief.
So this lady's coming over and she's guilting Marilyn and saying, be a good girl, help redeem your soul. And Marilyn's just like putting money in.
And I love when Clark Gable puts his hat over the thing. Like, I think that's enough.
Well, he says she ain't sinned that much.
That's right. She ain't sinned that much. That was great.
Yeah. So anyhow, and then they go to and Isabel sees her ex-husband on the street.
Okay, this scene has always been so weird to me because we lose Isabel. That's it. We don't ever see her again. Like, she just sees, like, all of a sudden, she's like, oh, there's my ex-husband and his new wife, and they're going to stay with me for a week, and I'm going to go off with them. And then that's it. I remember every single time I see this movie and that scene comes up, I'm like, that's right. Like, the first time I'm like, oh, where is she going? And then she never comes back. And every time I'm always like, there goes Selma Ritter. And it makes me sad because I love her character.
It's a shame to lose her.
It's such an abrupt ending. It does feel like a play. It feels like how you would lose somebody in a play. That you don't normally have characters just disappear like that in films. But at the same time, this movie is so much about their misfits. They'll come and they'll go, and there's no sense of stability. And so I think it still very much works for what the movie is saying. But I'm always like, I miss her. I miss her when she's gone, because I like it when there's the two female characters and the two male characters. We have a little bit more balance, and then all of a sudden Marilyn is completely outnumbered and doesn't really talk to any more women for the rest of the movie.
Yeah, and the husband's new wife was her best friend.
That's right. And so I'm like, why?
And she's like totally not mad about it.
Yeah,
she's like, no, well, that's the way it is. I lost the vacuum cleaner.
Yeah,
that's how
they
bad
never
a wife.
did find it or
something like that. So she goes off with them and they go to the rodeo. And then this is when Marilyn starts to recognize that the rodeo is not a place she likes, because she's sitting in the stands with Guido and Gay's with Perce trying to get him on his horse and stuff. And Guido explains to her why the horses are bucking. And she's like, that's not fair.
Yeah.
And she gets all upset about it.
Yeah.
But then she's distracted because, again, we see that little grandpa man and the little child, and she's trying to walk up the stairs, and he's all entangled in the paddle ball.
That's right. That's right, that paddle ball.
And she starts laughing about that, and she thinks that's so funny. That guy was just really funny. I was really confused because it said that James Barton played Fletcher's grandfather, which I thought was the role, but then later on I read that Rex Bell played that character, and then there's even a picture of Rex Bell. It's listed that he's Rex Bell, but yet it says that this James Barton played the character. So I really am confused at this point.
I know. I meant to actually check because I felt like I recognized the guy.
I tried to check,
yeah,
but I got two different answers
to the
same question. So I do not know.
Interesting.
It says on the credits, James Barton is Fletcher's grandfather, so I have to assume that it's him. I thought maybe Rex Bell played the guy that smacked her butt.
Oh.
But I'm not sure. I don't know. But anyhow, that's neither here nor there. But I was very confused. So if anybody knows the answer, please tell me. And knows for a fact. Maybe somebody like related to Rex Bell or James Barton. So they go to the rodeo, and then Perce starts to ride his horse, and he falls off the horse. Yes. And Marilyn becomes distraught. She's screaming. She's running down to the thing.
Yeah.
And she's all upset, and he's kind of dazed. And he comes out, and they're trying to patch him up. And actually, an interesting thing is the fellow that played the ambulance driver, or the guy that's trying to patch him up a little bit, was Marilyn Monroe's personal friend and masseuse. His name was Ralph Roberts, and he was cast as the ambulance attendant in the film's rodeos scene. He was kind of a stabilizing force on Marilyn. So
he kind of had the same role that Kevin McCarthy
Yeah,
had.
so I think that's why he was there. And she's all distraught. She's trying to take him to the hospital, and Gay's like, stop trying to run things. And again, this is where you get the two characters butting heads. And she's like, no, he's got to go to the hospital. And then they sort of bandage him up. And then they announce a bull riding. And Perce is like, oh, I got to go to the bull ride. And Gay's like, no, you got a couple more minutes. And then she really starts freaking out. She's like, what's going on? He's not going to go ride a bull. And Guido's like, well, he just wants to ride the bull. And she's trying to give him the money that they won, saying, don't ride the bull, here's the money. And she said, why are you doing it? Why are you doing it? And he said, I put in for it. I entered. As if that's the most normal reason to go ride the bull. You see a scene when he first gets on the horse where the horse bucks up and rears up. That happened in real life. And later on, you'll see he has a cut across the bridge of his nose and the back of his shirt is ripped. That actually happened when the horse reared up.
Okay.
And John Huston just kept that in the scene because it looked good for the situation.
Wow.
But when the horse reared up, he did get the cut on his nose.
Yeah, good
so
grief.
he falls off the bull as well, and then he's knocked unconscious.
Yeah,
and the bull's starting to come to attack him.
right,
And Rosalind
yeah.
is freaking out, and Gay has to run into the thing and get him out. And she thinks he's practically dead. She's crying in the car, this and that, and eventually he's all patched up again. And they give him like some sort of painkillers or something, and they send them on the way, and they go to the bar and start having drinks. And there's a scene again, a really poignant scene where he and Marilyn go out in the back.
Yeah.
It's this one long shot that John Huston was really afraid to do because he thought both Marilyn and Montgomery Clift were unreliable. And they said it was maybe even one of the longest shots of his career in film. And because each of them were more worried about the other person, that they managed to get it right with only 6 takes.
Wow.
And Marilyn was notorious for doing bazillion takes.
Yeah, I actually thought that shot and then the shot when she and Gay are talking when she's laying down in the back of the truck once they're out Mustanging. Those are 2 really long takes. And I just, especially knowing that everybody's like, oh, Marilyn could never, you had to do everything and almost like pickup shots and everything. Those are incredibly long takes.
Yeah.
You don't even get that kind of stuff in modern filmmaking. And they're great. The acting is fantastic in both scenes. People are really at the top of their game. Montgomery Clift, Clark Gable, and Marilyn were all very much toward the end of their careers. This is obviously the last film for both Clark Gable and Marilyn Monroe. And one of Montgomery Clift's last movies, I think he only made like a handful, maybe 3 or 4.
He made 3 after that.
I thought it was 3, so like 3 more after this. So there's almost no more films for them after this. But still, just seeing the acting, the caliber of the acting is incredible.
Yeah, it is. It is incredible, and especially that scene with him and Marilyn.
Yes,
and he's talking about his family.
Yes.
Again, here's Montgomery Clift being able to do what he does best: is this angst.
Yes,
he's known for that. He's very good at it, and you really feel for him, and you feel for Marilyn. It's like 2 lost souls is what they seem like, and it was like that in real life.
Yeah.
And I saw an interview that Montgomery Clift gave. He gave one televised interview, which I was lucky enough to see on the High Gardner show. And at one point, High Gardner asked him, "What's the best actress you've ever worked with?" And he said, "The most receptive actress I've ever worked with is Marilyn Monroe." Aww. And he worked with some phenomenal actresses.
Yeah.
He didn't say best. He said most receptive, but still, I thought that was a high compliment. To Marilyn Monroe.
Very much.
And then there's that scene where Gay thinks his children. I never understood that.
You know, that's such an interesting...
Were they there?
Yeah. The first time I saw it when I was young, I remember thinking they were there and then they left. But this time I really felt like they weren't there.
Like he just
because
invented
Guido,
it. He said, "Where's who?"
Yeah, exactly. And I feel like he would have... And then I think he was just kind of playing along with it. Like, oh, they're gone. But I watched his reaction this time, really trying to figure out, were Gay's kids there or not? And I really think he was so drunk he imagined that they were there.
And he goes out and he's climbing on his car, yelling.
He's freaking out.
A really good job by Clark Gable. I never thought Clark Gable had that kind of acting in him, I'll be quite honest.
And then it's always interesting when you do have these moments in people's careers where you really see them doing something that you had no idea they could. And then you're like, I wish more people had done that with this actor because I feel like we could have gotten more... Maybe he wasn't so always typecast in leading male roles. Maybe he would have had a little bit more freedom to do this kind of thing. But so if they existed or didn't exist, they're not there now. They're not there now.
And they all pile in the car. And then there's this thing again when they're driving home and Guido is going extremely fast. I don't like the way Guido treats Marilyn or Rosalind. It's almost like he's, I don't want to say gaslighting, but he's very toxic towards her. Like, I will do this if you do something for me. Yeah, it's very awful. I dislike it immensely. And it's interesting, earlier in the film, we forgot to mention when she was at the house, he told her the story about how his wife died. Basically, she was having a baby. He was up doing something with the house. Apparently, she had complications and she died. And she asked, why didn't you go get a doctor or take her to the hospital? And he said he had a flat tire and he didn't have a spare. And so she makes several comments throughout the film about not having a spare tire. And I think she even says it to Gay at one point. Like, what if you don't have a spare tire? Sort of like, you just let this this woman die because you didn't have a spare tire.
Yeah.
There's some sort of other symbolism behind that, but she refers to that several times.
Yeah, she does. It really bothers her. I actually feel like she talks about it more than Guido talks about it, even though it clearly bothers him. And I think some of his toxicity comes from that, and probably some of the self-blame. Like, there is a lot of great moments with each of the characters that we get this sense of where their trauma is coming from, where
and
that
the
pain is coming from.
He talks about the PTSD from the war,
Yes,
too.
that's right. He does.
In
And
that car
was a
ride.
really... I always find it interesting when we have those earlier movies, like anything before 1970. I know that's our cutoff year. And I think that it's interesting because we talk more about PTSD now than we did back then. And he really does talk about it. And at that time, people weren't really talking. It was always just like, oh, we went to war and we defeated the Germans and everything was great. And it's like, there was a lot of pain that was brought back from that war that people didn't talk about. So I did think that that was interesting to have him.
Yeah, when he talks about
that.
dropping the bombs and the puppy dogs and the...
That's a dark, grim monologue. So yeah.
That we like, but then he starts to do what we said. He kind of try and force Marilyn to, or Rosalind to
be with him or do what he says or whatever. And like,
and she doesn't.
She never goes along with it. You're right. It is a very strong character. Like, even though she has a lot of pain and she is very sad, she knows what she wants. She knows who she is, and she very much fights for that. She is very
she's not
stubborn.
going to let some man push her into a corner that she doesn't want to be pushed into.
I mean, you get the impression she already felt like that in her marriage, and she came out to Reno. That's how she ended up here, was to get away from that.
Right.
So yeah.
So they go back to the house, and there's a kind of funny scene where they're all drunk, and Guido's trying to build the house, and Montgomery Clift is trying to fight Clark Gable. They're very drunkenly trying to like put up their fists, and because he doesn't understand why he has bandages all over his head.
Yeah, that's right. He's starting to take off the bandages.
You leave me at a disadvantage all night. So, I don't know. I just really like that. But anyhow, so whatever, that happens. And then they decide to go Mustanging. And then Marilyn, again, obviously doesn't know what Mustanging entails because she just goes along quite willingly with them until they get up there. And again, it's Guido that says something about, because she's wondering why the dog seems upset. And he gives some vague reference of what they're going to do to the horses. And suddenly she's on high alert. Like, wait, what's this all about? And she finds out that what they're doing is they're rounding up these wild Mustangs to sell them to dealers to be killed and made
turned into dog food.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And she becomes extremely upset with Gay, and she's incredibly angry with him. But he tells her, it's that scene that you're talking about when she's laying on the truck, and he tells her that's not how it was originally done. It got changed on him, and then he compares it to her dancing and how I don't look at you that way because of your dancing. And she kind of warms towards him again until they actually get into the truck and she sees what exactly it's entailing. And this scene, I don't like to watch these scenes because I hate seeing, I'm sure that the horses were not harmed, but it doesn't look nice to see.
No, it doesn't look nice, like the horse wrangling. It's actually very, very stressful. And I always forget just how stressful it is until I'm watching it. And then I'm watching, I'm like, this is just
it's awful to see. And then, like they said, the guys are pulling these ropes and pulling these horses down. And they said that Montgomery Clift had forgotten his gloves on the one scene, and John Huston wouldn't stop to let him get gloves. So he said by the end of the scene, his hands were just bloody and raw because of the ropes. And then again, you have that scene where Clark Gable is being dragged by the horse.
Yes, that's, I feel like, one of the really famous shots of the movie.
But what sort of happens in that part is that Marilyn, once she finds out what they're doing, she gets really upset. She starts screaming at them and throwing this huge tantrum and flipping out.
Yeah, I love that shot. I love that shot when they're getting the stallion. They've already gotten the,
and she's
the mare.
she's
way back. She runs off and she's in that long shot.
Shrieking,
and she is just yelling, "Butchers!
You're 3 dead men."
Yeah. And the whole thing of like, you want to kill everything? Why don't you just go kill yourselves? I mean, it's intense. It's just this incredible little monologue. And I love that he did it in that long shot because it just feels so much more powerful. And that's so interesting to me that we always think of these close-ups for this emotion, but that far away, there's something just seeing her whole body just freaking out and shaking. It's incredible. It's, again, such a great performance. And that's actually always the scene. Like, when I think of this movie, it's usually that shot. That's the shot
it's
that
very
I'm like,
memorable.
Yeah. Yeah.
And also, at one point, Clark Gable says, oh, this has been changed around. Why don't we give this horses to her? And she comes up and says, I'll pay you $200 for him. And he gets infuriated because he's like, they're fighting this battle.
Yes.
Man versus woman. You're not going to
make me do anything I don't
exactly,
want to. Yeah.
And it also comes to terms later on as well. Again, this is another time when Guido says, I can cut those horses loose for you.
Yeah, but if you be with me. Yeah. Yeah.
Again, he does it a second time.
Yeah.
And she's just like, no.
Yeah, she's just
and
like, no.
I don't remember exactly what she says to him, but
it's harsh. It's actually really, really harsh about
She's like saying something about you're crying over your bombs and your wife. And she gives him the what for.
Really does. Like, she really cuts him down to size. And then I do love that Perce also offers to cut them loose, but there are no strings attached with that. And he does end up cutting them loose.
Right. And you can see throughout the thing that Perce is bothered by this as well. I mean, he's going along with Gay, but he says numerous times, like, it doesn't seem like it's worth it for 5 horses. Or it doesn't seem like it's worth it. He keeps saying it over and over again.
Yeah, and it's also the fact that they used to have so many more horses, and they came up there and they thought there were going to be 15, and then there's five and
horses.
like a colt or something.
And that one scene where the mother is tied down and the colt is like
kills me. It's horrible.
Hitting her neck with his
is trying to
hoof.
that is
trying to get her
sad.
to come up. Yeah. If you love animals, it is a hard thing to watch.
It is.
And I don't want to talk anymore about the plot because we haven't really spoiled the film yet, and
that's true.
Yeah,
not
so
completely.
we'll just
say,
all
right, fair enough.
You'll have to see what happens there, but I will say that the ending is so poignant to me because the ending scene, you're going to see something that you're never going to see again on camera. After that movie. Yeah, and when you think of it in that regard. And that's when I really think the music also.
Yes.
It's a good part for the music. It's very poignant. I've never watched this film and not cried at the end.
I know.
I'm just very touched always by the end of this film.
Yes.
So that is the Misfits. Did you have anything you want to mention?
Ooh. One of the things I do like, and we've mentioned it a little bit about how Clark Gable talks about how they've changed things up because originally they were Mustanging and it was to give kids horses for Christmas. I mean, obviously the horses probably want to be wild, right? But at least the idea was we are doing this so kids can have horses, and now they're getting sent off for dog food. And I love they've changed it on us, and this idea of the world moving on and past where you are and changing. And I also love, I have to mention this because I've been joking about it with my husband. I think I joked about it before. I love that every single time they talk about whatever they're doing, they're like, this is better than wages. It's better than wages. Everything is always like, they do not want to work a 9-to-5 job. So it's like they say it like maybe 4 or 5 times, like, this is better than wages, better than wages. So like today we were talking about something, I'm like, it's better than wages. And I just love that. That's a great little...
especially Gay. Gay says it more than anybody in the film. So he is still trying to be that cowboy. He doesn't want to conform to norms. I mean, it's very much like that. Now, this film did terrible in the box office.
I know.
Sadly.
Makes me sad.
As a matter of fact, they referred to as a box office disaster. And this is a film with Marilyn Monroe in.
Yeah.
And that it was not very common in Marilyn Monroe films. She was a huge box office hit. You also had Clark. I mean, the people who had this film, the director you had in this film, the fact that people hated it.
And
at the time, what a shame, because obviously we know now that this film is excellent. Critically acclaimed nowadays.
And what's so interesting about it is I think I saw this movie when I was 13 or 14, so it would have been like the late 90s. And I remember even then people didn't really love it. I remember it was hard to find because, that's back in the days you had to find the VHS. And everybody was always like, it's not a very good movie. Basically the only reason you want to watch it is because it's Clark Gable and Marilyn Monroe's last films. And then it's been interesting because in that amount of time, just in the last 25 years, you've really seen it. People have finally started appreciating because what was interesting is, I went into it expecting, it's not going to be very good, whatever. And I remember it wasn't maybe my favorite movie of any of theirs at the time, but it stuck with me. I thought about it more than I thought about a lot of their other movies. And then as I've gotten older, I found more of an appreciation for it, of how hard it is to live in the world. And that's what the movie's about. It's hard to be in this world. And that's what it's getting at. And I think just because Clark Gable was known for lighter films and Marilyn was known for lighter films, and this is not a light film. This is a gloomy movie. And so I think that was a lot of it. But I have been happy to see that it's gotten that critical acclaim.
And this, part of the reason why it might have not had as much success too is that we're dealing with United Artists. We're not dealing with some huge, like MGM or some big So I don't know how the distribution was for this film. Also, at one point, they had to shut down production because they said they had to send Marilyn to the hospital because she was so overwrought. She had to be in the hospital for 2 weeks. But what I have heard and what I have read, and whether this is true or not, I don't know, but I suspect it might be, that John Huston was a constant gambler and he exceeded his gambling allowance and he blew a bunch of the production money.
Oh, no.
And so he had to send Marilyn off to get hospitalized to save the production money.
Good grief.
That's what I hear. And I kind of believe it because I've heard other stories about him being a humongous gambler.
Yeah. One other thing that I wanted to mention is that there was always the story that Arthur Miller wrote this screenplay for Marilyn in hopes of saving their marriage. And then the big irony is
I've heard that
the
too.
on-set photographer, Inga Morath, ended up being his wife.
Yeah.
He met her on this
the
set while he was making this movie, trying to save his marriage to Marilyn Monroe. And he stayed married to Inga for the rest of his life.
Yeah.
His daughter, Rebecca Miller, that's who his daughter's to.
That is true. So he wasn't trying that hard to save his marriage.
Yeah, I mean, either that or it was way past saving. But I remember reading about that when I was a kid. I'm like, oh my gosh, literally you were writing this to try to save your marriage and you met your next wife on the set. Inga Morath has beautiful photography. She's very, very talented, absolutely in her own right. I love her photography. I just have always thought it was interesting that that's such a piece of film history there.
I do believe he was trying to write the script for her and be on the film with her to try to save the marriage. But I think once they actually got onto the film,
I mean, they were always a really weird match. Yeah. Marilyn was really very intellectual, and she wanted to be more appreciated for that. And I think she felt like I'm going to marry this intellectual person. And I just think
he was rather emotionally abusive towards her, I believe.
Yeah, I could very much see that.
I heard a story about when they were on The Prince and the Showgirl, and he would not allow the staff to look at him.
I could see that. Yeah, I could see that.
Anyhow, one thing we do here on Silver Screen Time Machine is we give our star ratings. So it's between 1 and 5, 1 being the worst, 5 being the best. What do you give the Misfits?
Oh, wow. That's so hard.
It is hard.
It is hard. I'd say 4.5. I'm going to do 4.5. I don't feel like it's a perfect film. No. Like we said, there's these really weird jumps at times. You can't always follow the emotions, but I do love it. I love so much about it, and I love what it represents in film, too, and like this moment and the performances. Yes, 4.5. I'll go 4.5.
Okay. I'm going to give it a 4. The reason I don't give it higher is because I am so bothered by the horse scenes. It bothers me immensely.
Fair.
I love the cinematography. I love the location shots. I love the acting. The acting in this film is what this film is about. Yes. This film is about the acting. Every actor in this film is phenomenal.
Amazing.
From Thelma Ritter, Eli Wallach, Marilyn Monroe, Clark Gable, Montgomery Clift. It's amazing. It's my favorite performance from Montgomery Clift just because I like the lighthearted character. It might be my favorite performance from Marilyn Monroe, and it's definitely my favorite performance from Clark Gable. So,
very good.
4. So, anyhow, thank you so much for being our guest today. I appreciate you coming in, Gwendolyn. And like you said, check out Gwendolyn's books. And maybe sometime we'll see you again.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. This was so much fun.
Yeah, my pleasure. And for Silver Screen Time Machine, this is Wendy saying goodbye. Thank you for listening to our podcast today. Please don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and TikTok. And please leave us a comment or a review on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast. Intro and outro music composed by Heidi Engel. Artwork by Tyler Birch. Produced and edited by Wendy Whittick. Recorded at PCTV Studios, Pittsburgh, PA. See you next time.